just want to introduce myself. My name is Beth Hogue. I am in the community. I'm a cancer rehabilitation physiotherapist, and I also act on the board of directors for Breast Cancer Action, which is why I'm here this evening. I want to welcome everybody this evening. I'm very excited for this topic. Susan, our speaker, and I had the pleasure of meeting her several months ago. It's all been virtual, but it has just been a delight to speak with her, and I'm so excited that she has agreed to come and speak with us this evening. Let me tell you a little bit about Susan before we get started. So Susan is a registered dietitian with the College of Dietitians of Ontario. She has worked at Princess Margaret Cancer Centre in Toronto since 1990, with both in and outpatients. Her areas of practice have been mainly with the breast, lung, thyroid, and esophageal cancer populations. Susan provides nutrition information classes for those on cancer treatment, including education sessions specifically for those being treated for breast cancer. She believes that good nutrition is part of the foundation that helps people maintain strength during treatment. She also values connecting with the community and has been giving nutrition sessions and written articles for various community organizations such as Wellspring and Lung Cancer Canada, and now Breast Cancer Action. Before I pass it over to Susan, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules for this evening. First of all, to remind everybody that this session is being recorded and will be made available on our website for future members or members who were not able to participate this evening. So if you do not want your face visible, please make sure you log your face off. In terms of how we're going to deal with questions this evening, Susan has said that she quite likes an interactive focus. So if you have a question while Susan is speaking, I invite you to unmute yourself and sort of pop your hand in as we go. And if you're uncomfortable doing that, you could please place your question in the chat box, and I will then cover those questions at the end this evening. Okay, so without further ado, Susan, I'm excited to hear what you have to say, and welcome and thank you so much for joining us this evening. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Beth, and it's a pleasure to be here. I love speaking to the community, and as Beth said, I do like it to be interactive, so as I'm going along, please feel free to ask questions. If we do find that it gets to be question overload, we can always save some till the end. Okay, but the title of today's talk, it's Healthy Eating During Breast Cancer Treatment. If anybody has not started treatment yet, that's fine. These are, I think, helpful hints for getting yourself ready for treatment as well. So I just want to, Beth, if you can go to the next slide, I'll go over the goals of the presentation. Let's see if we can do it. Yes. Okay, so the goals of today's presentation, I wanted to review the research a little bit that's out there on nutrition and breast cancer. And I think that's important because that's really what we base our recommendations on. Then I want to do a little review of a healthy diet, which for people going through treatment for breast cancer is not very different than the regular general population who's not going through cancer treatment. And coping with any side effects that you might be having while you're on treatment. I know that fatigue is the one that I hear the most about. That seems to be, regardless of cancer diagnosis, when people are going through cancer treatment, that seems to be universal, that fatigue is often experienced. And in the breast cancer population, unlike a lot of other cancers, there's a percentage of women who tend to gain weight. And so I think a lot of people aren't expecting that and find it distressing. So I wanted to talk about that as well. Okay, next slide, thanks. So this is a little in a nutshell slide. This is telling you about the research that is out there. Now, WCRF stands for World Cancer Research Fund, and AICR stands for American Institute of Cancer Research. So as their name suggests, the World Cancer Research Fund is an international body, and the American Institute for Cancer Research is from the United States, and it's an American body. So they have done research, not done the research, I'm sorry, they have looked at the existing research on breast cancer, and in particular, because breast cancer is a very treatable illness, there's a large number of women who fall into the category of survivor. And so what they have done is they've actually come up with some findings specifically for breast cancer survivors, which would apply to everybody in this group. So I just wanted to review this with you. Now, what they're saying here is there is some links between better survival after breast cancer and the following behaviors or conditions. So I want to just make a note that the evidence is not strong enough to say that these activities or these conditions are responsible for the better survivorship, but they're associated with better survivorship. And because they're all healthy behaviors, we have no problem with recommending people follow those. Okay. But I just want to let you know the evidence isn't strong enough to say it's a cause and effect situation. But being a healthy body weight is associated with better survival, which means avoiding obesity. Being physically active, I know that's not a food recommendation. These recommendations are both, Beth, I'm sure you're familiar with this. It's the physical activity and nutrition. They look at both of those topics. Eating foods that contain fiber, and the next one surprises a lot of people. Eating foods that contain soy is associated with better survival. And lowering the intake of total fat. And the one that I think is most important, more than lowering total fat, is reducing intake of saturated fat or animal fats. Okay, those are what they find is associated with better survival. And that's fine. You can go to the next one. Now, I'm just going to go over kind of a modified Canada's food guide. So what I want to mention, I realized when you look at the top of the slide and it said vegetables 4 or more servings and fruit 2 to 3 servings, it might sound daunting. It might sound like a lot, but there's a definition to what a serving is. It's not just the amount that you put on your plate. So if you're having a bowl of salad, that's a large bowl of salad, that could count for 2 or 3 or 4 servings of vegetables, depending on how big it is and what's in it. So to give you an idea of what these serving sizes are, if it's a leafy green, like lettuce or bok choy or spinach, if it's a raw leafy green, then a cup of torn up leaves equals 1 serving. And if it's chopped up fruits or vegetables, then half a cup equals 1 serving. So you can see, you could easily have a salad that has a cup of lettuce plus a whole cup of other chopped up vegetables like tomatoes and cucumber and various other vegetables. So a cup of chopped vegetables plus a cup of leafy greens, that salad would be 3 servings. So it's not as hard to get to your 4 servings of vegetables in a day as the number 4 suggests. And with fruit, what equals a serving is also half a cup of cut up of fruit, but a medium handheld fruit, medium-sized handheld fruit. So I'm not talking about a watermelon, that's a big fruit, but a handheld fruit would be an apple or an orange or a pear. One of those equals a serving. Okay. And I think, I just want to make another point about my veggies. I want to let people know, I realized that there's a lot of starchy vegetables out there. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, yams, cassava. Although, yes, those are vegetables, I would say when I talk about those, I usually leave those for the other starchy foods that would be like breads and grains, because they have a similar nutrition profile. So what I tell people when they're choosing their vegetables, especially if they're experiencing weight gain, is try to choose mostly non-starchy vegetables rather than going heavy for the starchy ones. Okay, so all those leafy greens count as non-starchy. All the cruciferous vegetables, so that would include things like cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. They're in season now. I find those stalks everywhere. I love them. So those count as cruciferous vegetables. They're non-starchy. So oh gosh, radishes, cucumbers, there's mushrooms, there's just so many vegetables. I don't want to spend 40 minutes talking about different vegetables, but there's so many non-starchy vegetables that you could have quite a wide variety, and it's going to add very few calories to your diet. For those, if anyone is finding themselves in a situation where they're struggling to keep their weight up, don't worry about including an extra potato here or there. But if you find that your weight is going up and it's unwanted weight gain, keeping those at a minimum, not eliminating them. I would never tell anyone to cut potatoes out of their diet. I love them too much, but keeping them lower level and going for the non-starchy most of the time. Next slide, please. Okay, breads and grains. So things that fall into this category, as well as breads, this would be pasta, rice, barley, all the starchy foods. And for our consideration, you could call the potatoes, even though they're not in the breads and grains, you could call them being in this category as well. The recommendation for this group would really be, because that fiber is linked to better survival after breast cancer, the whole grains are what you should choose most of the time. It doesn't mean you can never have white rice or you could never have white bread. I think that, if you're out in a restaurant or something, you quite often don't have the choice of what to get. I wouldn't worry so much about that. But what you do on a daily basis at home, I would choose whole grains most of the time, and that will help keep the fiber up, because the white breads don't provide any. If you look at the nutrition label, there's a little black and white nutrition label on every packaged food. And one of the pieces of nutrition information that they provide is the fiber for a serving. So they'll tell you on your white bread or your whole wheat bread how many grams of fiber are in a serving. Usually in bread, they often count 2 slices as a serving. And you can see, if you compare the various white breads that are out there and the various whole grain breads, the whole grains are going to give you quite a bit more fiber. The white bread's close to 0. Now, when I say 5 servings a day, again, it's not what you put on your plate that's a serving, that's your portion. And if you went to everybody who's in this group, you might find that everybody takes a different amount. So in order to be able to talk about it intelligently, serving has to have a definition. So for our purposes, 1 slice of bread equals a serving. It doesn't mean you can't have 2 servings at once. If you had a sandwich, you would have 2 servings, of course, that's fine. But just to be aware of what equals 1 serving, 1 slice of bread, and a normal slice of bread. So I know sometimes they sell Texas toast and it's like this thick. That would probably be 1.5 or 2, depending on how thick it is. But a normal thin slice of bread equals 1 serving. And then if a grain is cooked, so you know how, of course, rice when it's raw is, you can have a lot of rice for a 1/2 cup, but it's a 1/2 cup of the cooked grain that equals a serving. So again, if you were having rice as your starch with your dinner and you wanted to have a whole cup, that's fine, but that's 2 servings. Okay, so it's the amount after it's cooked that equals the serving. So the same with pasta, 1/2 cup equals a serving, or barley, or any of those grains. Okay, next slide, please. Now I have a few slides on different protein foods, because Canada's food guide changed a few years ago. And what they used to have is a milk and dairy product section. They used to have a meat section. And I think that's because a lot of the stakeholders in the food industry had a say in how the food guide was put together. And now what they've done is they put all the foods that provide protein into a protein section. So all those foods are still in the food guide. Some people thought they were removed, but they weren't. It's just that they don't have their own sections with their own titles. So I broke it down a little bit. I kept milk separate because I get a lot of questions about it. So I just wanted to talk about foods that give you protein in your diet, which is, I want to make the point, protein in your diet during treatment is very important. That is what helps your body heal. So if you think of having surgery or radiation or chemotherapy, some of the normal cells, as well as, of course, cancer cells being killed, some of the normal cells are also damaged. And protein is the part of your diet that helps your body heal from an injury. All those treatments cause injury. So you want to have a good amount of protein in your diet. And if anyone wants to know how much protein they should have in a day during treatment, the way to figure it out, it's a little more than what you need just for normal wear and tear. So if you know your weight in kilograms, you need 1 gram of protein for every kilogram that you weigh. So if you weighed 60 kilograms, you need 60 grams of protein in your diet a day. If you weigh 70 kilograms, you need 70 grams of protein in your diet per day. So it would be different for every person, which is why I didn't put a number up here, but it's an easy equation, 1-to-1. For every kilogram, it's a gram of protein. Okay. Now, again, any packaged foods that you buy, like if you're buying a carton of milk, for example, it will show you how many grams of protein you get per cup or per 250 mils. And for most milk, it's in the neighborhood of 8 grams of protein per cup. That's how much you get from milk. And I want to, because some people can't drink milk or they choose not to drink milk, I want to let you know about other options, things that are used as milk substitutes. People often use soy beverage, or they use almond or rice beverage. There's many different things out there. My sister's now a big fan of the oat beverage that's out there. And those are all things that people can use as a milk substitute. I just want to let you know that the only one that has as much protein as animal milk, like cow's milk or goat's milk, the only one that has as much protein is the soy beverage. Okay. Now, if you're a person who gets a lot of protein in your diet from other things, you might not care that the milk that you choose, whether or not it's a good protein source. But if you're someone who's a lacto-ovo vegetarian, which means you don't eat meat or poultry or fish, but you do consume dairy products and you do consume eggs, then chances are you're counting on dairy products for a good part of your protein. And if you switch that to be something like almond beverage, you'd be losing a lot. So that's something to be aware of. For some people, like I said, it might not matter, but for some of you, it might. But what I do want people to also be aware of is that animal milk, in its natural form, it contains animal fat. And that's what the cream part of milk is. It's the fat part of the milk. So if you are having whole milk, and you'll see that it gives you the percentage, all the dairy products give you percentages, it's 3.25 grams of fat, and by volume, by the amount. So the skim milk has virtually all the fat removed. So you're still getting the protein that's in the milk. It's still fortified with vitamin D. It's still a good source of calcium. Like all the things that milk is known for, the skim milk gives you just as much as the regular full fat milk. The only thing you're getting less of is fat and calories. So again, skim or 1% would be a good choice if anyone finds themselves gaining unwanted weight. And I think it's a good choice for everybody because it is reducing the fat content in your milk is an easy way to keep the saturated fat on the lower side. So I think that's a good idea. Does anyone have questions about that? Anything? Oh, Beth. Oh, you're muted. Oh,
I'm muting myself there. I
Okay.
actually do have a question about that because I get questions about this and I'm curious too. So with these dairy alternatives, you've mentioned soy, which I think is a huge question I get. I'm curious about almond milk because from a protein perspective, that's actually really good to know. But what about from a calcium perspective? Because I know calcium can be quite a concern for a lot of women, maybe not during chemo per se, but certainly some of the treatments thereafter and the induction of menopause. So
Yeah,
what about calcium with these milk or milk alternatives?
that you'd have to look because I think it would depend whether or not they're fortifying it with calcium, because the almonds themselves, I mean, almonds, God love them, and me too, I love them. But I think people, when they hear that almonds contain calcium, they think they contain a lot. And given the calories just in nuts in general, and almonds are a nut, you would have to eat such a large caloric load of nuts to meet your calcium needs that it's not advisable. Like a handful of nuts, again, it's the portion that would make the difference, right? A handful of nuts makes a great snack, and it might give you 50 milligrams of calcium, which is something, but it's not the same as the about 300 milligrams you get from a cup of milk, right? So they're not equal. So in the almond beverage, you would get a little bit of calcium, but I don't think, unless they fortify it, I don't think it's going to be very much.
Right. And that makes sense, because I was shocked that I'm an almond milk drinker and I accidentally bought a different brand and realized how low the calcium was. And that's because it wasn't fortified. So I think, yeah, that's a really, really good point. Thank you.
Yeah. I see a question is being typed in the chat about brand of soy milk. Honestly, I think they're going to be very similar. Each company makes more than one type. Like they'll make an unflavored one, they'll make a vanilla one, they'll make a chocolate one. If you like chocolate milk, then the chocolate soy beverage is going to be a similar thing. So any of the flavored ones, of course, are going to have added sugar. So that's something to be aware of. Just like chocolate milk has added sugar. It's not, in any container of milk, you're going to see a few grams of sugar because there's naturally, that's what the lactose is. There's a naturally occurring sugar in milk. But if they're making a flavored one that is sweet, they're adding additional sugar, not just the naturally occurring sugar. So that's something to be aware of. But you can get unsweetened soy beverage. So instead of suggesting a brand, like a brand name, I would say look for one that doesn't have added sugar to it. That would be the one that I would pick. And other soy products, I actually am going to talk about soy in just a minute. If we go to it's coming up. Okay, the other, besides dairy products, animal proteins are very high, of course. So anyone who's an omnivore, who's eating all different foods that are available to you, that means you're including, you might not be including all of them, but you're including various meat or poultry or fish in your diet. Those are excellent sources of protein. And just to give you an idea, that 3 ounces of meat or poultry or fish provides about 3 ounces, it's 21. I hate these like very close. I like things to be even numbers. I find it's harder for people to remember when it's like 21, 28, whatever. But about 3 ounces has about 20 grams of protein. So remember when I said you need about 1 gram of protein for every kilogram you weigh. So if you had a 3 ounce portion of, let's say, fish or whatever, that would be giving you close to like a third of your protein requirement for the day. So that you can see, having protein in at least 2 meals, you'd probably be covered for your protein requirements, because you'd be getting small amounts from other foods as well. Okay, I'm just going to finish talking about this slide, and then I'm going to go back to the question. There was a question about estrogen for milk consumption for women with estrogen receptor positive. Spoiler alert, it's okay. But I'll go with this, finish this first. So I really think for people who eat red meat every day, there really should be a limit on it. And that's not related to breast cancer so much as it is colorectal types of cancer. And I'm sure nobody wants to go through what you're going through right now, and then later on down the road have another diagnosis, because colorectal cancers are quite common in our society. And they have found that if you consume a lot of red meat, that is a risk factor for developing colorectal cancers. So if you're having it once or twice a week, that's not a concern. But if you go over 18 ounces a week, that's what they found to be the threshold. If you're going over 18 ounces, or if you think in terms of grams for cuts of meat, 500 grams equals about 18 ounces. If you go over that on a regular basis, then that poses a risk factor for colorectal cancer. So you can see if you have, let's say, a 3 or 4 ounce portion, twice a week, you're well with underneath that. So it's not something I very much like people to be able to include the foods they enjoy in their diet. But I do think if you are a person, you know, I know in some family situations, it's not dinner unless there's red meat. So I just want you to be aware that if you are having it on a daily basis, then for sure you will be going over that 18 ounces. And it would be better to add more variety to your diet, include a fish meal once or twice a week, include poultry once or twice a week. And what I like to challenge people to do for both your own health and the health of the planet is try, if you've never tried them, try a plant-based meal once a week, which I think is a doable thing for meat lovers to do it once in a while. And if you want to, another way that you can reduce red meat and still have red meat is to make each portion smaller. So what I suggest for people who do a lot with, let's say, ground beef or ground pork, if you're making things, so this would include things like a meat spaghetti sauce, a hamburger, meatloaf, those things that where you'll use a ground meat, instead of using all ground beef or ground pork, substitute half of that with ground chicken or ground turkey. The red meat has a stronger flavor, so it will still taste like what you're used to and what you enjoy, but you will be cutting the red meat in half. So for every hamburger that you eat, you'd only, let's say it's a 4-ounce hamburger, you'd only be getting 2 ounces of red meat. So that's a way to reduce the red meat and still have it, right? For people who love it. And then the next slide, please. Okay, now here is where soy comes in. So I'm going to try and address those questions. The first thing is, so if people are not familiar with soy foods, tofu is bean curd, and it's from the soybean. That is what's in the picture there, the white cubes. And if you are ever looking for it in the store, it's refrigerated and it's in a little, usually a white little tub. It looks like a little white brick sitting there in water, right? So that's how it looks in the store. And if you opened the package and tasted it, you'd go, bleh. The thing about tofu is it's pretty tasteless. So of course, plain, that's not very good, but it means it's great for taking on the flavor of whatever it's cooked in. If you put it in a soup, if you put it in a stew, if you're putting it in a stir fry with a sauce, it is going to just soak up whatever flavors are in the dish that you're cooking. So it hides very nicely. It's not something that everyone's going to go, ooh, that tastes weird. It's just going to taste like whatever flavor you've added to your meal. Edamame is often used as a snack, just like you might take a handful of nuts. You might take a handful of toasted or roasted soybeans, so they're crunchy and they can be flavored. They're usually salty flavors, delicious. And then the soy beverage that we talked about, which can be used as a milk substitute, right? So that is, those are usually the main ways that people have soy products. Now, to have soy beverage, I realize if you're drinking it, you might be drinking it every day, just like if you're putting it on your cereal every morning instead of using milk. That's fine. The research that's out there on soy is that women who have breast cancer, they've done big studies in the United States. They've also done big studies in China, where soy is consumed a lot. And they have found in these large studies with thousands of breast cancer survivors, the women who consume the most soy do not have any higher recurrence rates of their breast cancer than the women who consume the least soy. So it really makes us comfortable to say that it's all right to include in your diet. And as you could see from the very first slide that talked about the research, there was a point about longer survival after breast cancer and consuming foods that contain soy. And it might be that because soy has a weak plant estrogen, what it does is it takes the place of some of your body's natural, stronger estrogen in those breast cancer receptor cells. Those estrogen receptor cells. And so a weak estrogen that is in the food is displacing the strong estrogen. And so that might be the reason why soy in the diet, which sounds counterintuitive because there's a weak estrogen in the soy, but that might be why that weak estrogen might be blocking stronger estrogen and resulting in, obviously one meal, it doesn't matter, but if it's consumed regularly, it could significantly lower the exposure to estrogen. So that could possibly be the reason for it. Now, after I've just made this big plug for soy foods, I also want to make a point that these studies were done with food. Don't go to a health food store and buy some concentrated soy estrogen, because that was not studied and that might not be safe for breast cancer survivors. So we're just talking about natural foods that are okay to eat. Okay. So in terms of milk, I believe it was whether it's soy beverage or whether it's fluid milk, it's fine for women with breast cancer to consume either. I would go, if you're drinking cow's milk, I would go for the lower fat choice. But other than going for the lower fat choice, it's fine to drink animal milk. Oh, I was trying to advance the slide. Sorry, Beth. Okay. I want to talk about supplements. I know I just mentioned not going and buying some kind of an estrogen soy supplement, but also I want to make a comment about antioxidant nutrients while you're going through treatment. Common vitamins that are taken by people just in general include vitamin C and vitamin E, and those are both antioxidant nutrients, as it turns out. And although it's perfectly fine to eat foods that contain those vitamins, but we don't recommend taking large doses of antioxidant vitamins or herbals, like in a concentrated form, in pill form, right? And the reason for that is that when you are getting, let's say, chemo or radiation, those treatments kill cancer cells by causing those cancer cells to oxidize. And that's how they kill them. And if you're taking a medicinal dose of an antioxidant, it's possible that it could reduce the effectiveness of treatment, and you don't want to do that. So I'm not saying that you can't have, let's say, a mango, right? Like that's a good source of vitamin C. I don't want anyone to get scurvy. So I don't want people to cut out their vitamin C fruits. That's fine. You can leave those in your diet. But I'm talking about taking large doses. Like when you have something like an orange, that has about 60 milligrams of vitamin C in it, which is a very moderate amount. But when you look at the doses that you can get vitamin C in the store, I think the smallest one is 100 milligrams, but then they're 250, 500, 1,000. Like all of a sudden, you're getting much more than you would ever naturally consume through food, even if you're good with your fruit. You would never have 1,000 milligrams a day. So that's something to be aware of. It's not that we want you to stop having it. It's just that we don't want you to go overboard. There's just like you can get a deficiency with too little, there could possibly be harm from having too much. So just to be aware of that. But still eat fruit. Okay. Now, I just want to take a moment and ask if anyone has questions. Okay, I see that there's a question. Would lion's mane or chaga be okay during treatment? Anything that you want to take, I would say, talk to your doctor. I know where I am, we have outpatient pharmacy where you can bring questions to a pharmacist. So I'm not sure what facility you're getting your treatment at, what their resources are, but I would talk to, definitely if you're getting chemo, there's a pharmacist who's in charge of the chemo. I would ask about anything that you want to take from a health food store. I would check with them because they'll be able to look not just whether it's safe on its own, but is there a potential interaction with the chemotherapy? Okay. I mean, I tend to take a page from my brother-in-law, who's an anesthesiologist. He says, because we haven't studied a lot of these things in conjunction with certain drugs, he says, I just tell people to stop, right? If it's something I'm not sure about, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Just stop it before I give you an anesthetic in his case, but in our case, before you're going to have chemo, because we don't want you to be the one where they find out there's an interaction, right? Okay, thanks. Okay, I want to talk about the side effect of weight gain. I think it's distressing to a lot of women, and it's also not expected, and some reasons for it. Chemotherapy, you get steroids when you get chemo, and quite often people feel unwell if they are hungry, if they have an empty stomach. So they feel like they have to snack more often than usual. So they may be eating more because of the steroids. Hormone changes, even with the same level of physical activity and the same level of food intake, if you are premenopausal or perimenopausal, which means around the time of menopause, you may have treatment putting you into menopause. And with a reduction of estrogen, one of the effects it has an effect on your metabolic rate, which means how quickly you're burning calories. And when estrogen goes, you're burning calories more slowly. You're more efficient, which is great in a starvation situation to be more efficient. However, if you can eat anything you want and you're feeling hungry, maybe it's not so great. And that can lead to weight gain, right? If you're revving at a slower rate, your calories aren't burning, just when you're at rest, your calories aren't burning as quickly. So that's one thing that can have an effect. And unfortunately, unlike a natural menopause that takes place over a number of years, it's quicker because the drugs they give you just stem it. And then the one I put in a different color is the one you can do something about, and that's personal behavior. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about, your personal behavior. All right. First of all, why do we care? It's fine, a tiny bit of weight gain, like anyone who gains 2 or 3 pounds. I don't want people to be terrified that they gain a little bit of weight. The thing that they're concerned about is significant weight gain that puts you into the obese category. That's really what's been shown to increase the risk of recurrence. So that's something to be aware of, that obese women tend to have recurrence rates that are higher than the average population. So we don't want people to gain a lot of weight, right? So some things that you can do is spread your calories throughout the day instead of having I think what a lot of people do to control weight, or if they notice they're gaining a bit, is they tend to skip breakfast, and then they tend to eat all evening. Right? Once you give yourself permission to eat, then because you're starving from a day of very little food, and they eat all evening. And what you're doing is you're getting the bulk of your calories when you're the least active, and that is not great. If you think of the word breakfast, it's the breaking of your overnight fast. You want to start yourself burning calories earlier in the day when you're up and about and moving around, not in the evening when you're maybe doing this, which is sitting in a chair, watching me gab about food, or watching TV or listening to podcasts. Usually in the evening, people are very sedentary. And so that's not when you need most of your calories. And then after an evening of sitting, then you're going to bed. So during your most sedentary half of the day, evening and night, that's not when you have to load up on calories. It's better to have moderate amounts like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and not have a lot of extra in the evening. Okay. And also, by spreading your meals out fairly evenly, it does help to avoid drops in your blood sugar that could lead to cravings. And I've never had anyone say, gee, I was really craving celery sticks, right? Nobody does that. When you feel like the bottom drops out of your blood sugar, you want something that's high calorie and you want it fast. So you don't make great choices usually. Usually it's something you can rip open and eat quickly. And depending on whether you like sweet or salty, it's going to be something like a chocolate bar, or it's going to be a bag of chips. That's my weakness. Sign me up for the chips. But so that's something to be aware of, that if you let yourself get to the point where you just need something right away, you're going to go for whatever's easiest. And the beauty of the least nutritious food is they make it so easy, right? It doesn't take any prep whatsoever. And another thing to do is be aware. I purposely put a picture of red meat. One lady said, I thought we weren't supposed to eat a lot of red meat. That's right. So be aware of where the higher fat and the higher calorie foods are in your diet. And when you are having them, make sure you have some, like let's say you were at a barbecue. This is obviously a barbecue picture. And let's say you would have had a sausage and a pork chop. Maybe just say, which one do I like better? And just have one, not both. And then fill out your meal with some other things that are lower calorie and lower fat, right? Having some vegetable side dishes, a salad, having a fruit plate on the table for people to have at dessert time, having things that you don't want to just have a smaller portion and then feel like you didn't get a whole meal. You want to have some other things available, of course, but they don't have to all be the high fat, high calorie things that you have a large portion of. I know my sister, when she was doing Weight Watchers, she used to make a ginormous pot every weekend. She used to make a pot of this vegetable soup, and she would just put in like a whole head of broccoli, half a head of cabbage. She would put in a couple of carrots and like just a lot of vegetables, right? A few zucchinis. She would just chop up whatever she could find, and just she would have a bowl of that before every meal. And she said having that bowl just enabled her to control the portion of the other foods that she was eating, right? So she didn't feel like she was starving, even though the soup itself had very few calories. And another thing that I think people don't count the beverages that they consume as having calories, and that's a very easy way to get calories. So if you're a water drinker or let's say a tea drinker, you might be having pretty well 0-calorie beverages, but there are so many things that are out there that are disguised as low-calorie beverages that really are not. So I said, like, if you're having a cup of tea, that's low calorie. But if you're having one of those big cans of iced tea that they sell, they put so many, I used to know it off by heart. And now I think they're 12-ounce cans, and some of them are 16-ounce cans, which are big servings. And they've got like 16 teaspoons of sugar in them. It's crazy how much is in it. And the same for like soft drinks, like I don't want to say a brand, like colas or ginger ale, all of those fizzy pops, those are full of sugar. And I put dessert coffee. Well, I guess it should be brackets. I didn't do the two. Anyway, the reason I put for coffee, a cup of coffee itself is very low calorie. But if you go to any one of these coffee shops and you get something that has 3 inches of syrup, coffee flavored syrup, then 3 inches of cream, then whipped cream on top. And while we're at it, let's make a caramel drizzle. And do you want a flavor shot of whatever, which is just syrup? All of a sudden, you've got something that has the same calories as a slice of cheesecake, but you perceive it as not much more than a coffee. So what I would say, if that's something you have as a specific little treat once in a blue moon, that's fine. But if you're having that every afternoon, I would say have a cup of coffee instead. Even put a cream and a sugar in it. It's still only going to be about 50 calories. Like, don't have these really calorie packed beverages because they can add so much. Somebody asked if it was okay to have one of those once a week. I would say, yeah, especially if it's your habit to do it every day and you reduce it to once a week, that's a big improvement. And also look at the size that you're buying. If you're getting mediums or large, maybe try a small one, because of course the calories are going to be higher in the bigger drink. Okay. I think if your weight is stable, I think that's fine. Another thing, if you do find yourself gaining unwanted weight, not that you have to do this forever, but maybe just record what you eat for a few days, like a 3-day period. They've done studies that show that people, just the act of writing it down, people can control what they eat better, because it goes from being mindless to being mindful. You become aware of what you're eating, and you might have sat with a bag of cookies in front of the TV set, but when you're recording and the number goes up 6, 8, 10, 12, then you'll stop yourself. You'll go, whoa, I didn't realize what I was doing. So what I would say is bring 2 cookies to the TV. And then if you want more, go back and only get 2 more, right? So that you're not just mindlessly putting your hand in that bag. Because I do think people just learn so much about what they're eating when they write it down for a few days. And then the other thing is, which I think is really important for this group, because you're going through something quite stressful. You know, when you're going through cancer treatment, your life is really disrupted and you've got a lot of emotional energy that is going towards getting through treatment. And I do think, you know, some of you might not be working through your treatment, which I think is wise if you can do it. However, that gives you time to think. And so you might be having more episodes of feeling bored or more times where you're feeling anxious. So I do think that we eat for comfort, not just because we're hungry. And so if you know certain emotions trigger you to dive into a bag of cookies or something, then what I would say is try to have a non-food way of dealing with those emotions. We got a nice dump of snow here in Toronto. I used to live in Ottawa, and I know Ottawa gets lots of lovely snow. But when the weather is good for walking and it's not too slippery on the sidewalks, taking a walk in the evening after dinner, besides burning a few calories, it also, I think, is good for mood. And I think that's very important. So it can help you. And if you can walk with a friend, even better, because then you've got some social interaction going on at the same time. And then the other thing is plan for a healthy snack. You know, don't say I'm not going to snack at all, but it doesn't have to be a bag of chips or a bag of cookies. If you can have some easy things in the fridge or on the counter, like a fruit bowl, so that you can have something. And I know what you're saying, a piece of fruit doesn't substitute for a bag of chips. So do something like, my favorite evening snack that I feel self-righteous about is some plain yogurt, toss some berries on it, some sliced almonds, right? It's for a little bit of crunch, and then a teaspoon of maple syrup drizzled on it because it's unsweetened yogurt and it's quite sour on its own, but the fruit and a little bit of maple syrup just perks it right up. And that is a satisfying snack. It really does make you feel like you ate something, and it's not hard to put together, right? It's nobody's cooking anything. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is fatigue. As I said, it's the most common side effect. So next slide. Some things that you can do, if anyone is offering to help you while you're going through this, instead of saying, no, I'm okay, why not say, great, thank you. You can. As you can tell, I've got a little bit of a raspy throat here. And I just got over COVID after dodging it for 2.5 years. And I asked one of my neighbors to pick me up a few things from the grocery store on his way home from work. I asked my niece to go get me some Tylenol when I ran out. You know, if you ask for help, I think that can make your life a lot easier. If you have a friend who's offering to do anything for you and you know you like their cooking, ask them to make something like a casserole or a stew, something that could be portioned into individual portions, and put it in your freezer. And that can be a lifesaver when you're feeling too tired to cook, but you still are able to eat. So I would definitely have a few things on hand. So like I say, let people help you who want to help you. And also have a few shelf-stable items on hand, cans of tuna or salmon, some legumes, cans of legumes. You know, you can have a tin of lentils, combine that with a container of chicken broth, and you've got basically a lentil soup. You know, put a few herbs in it, and you've got a lentil soup that's quite nutritious and very easy to make. You don't want to give yourself a project of having everything being made from scratch when you're going through a situation where you're so tired, because you won't be able to do it. You're just going to make yourself feel bad about it. Okay. Now, of course, I put a picture of some salad prep because not everything can be portioned out and put in the freezer. Obviously, you're not going to freeze your fresh vegetables. But what you could do is, if you're going to wash some lettuce, wash the whole head at once, and then pull out that salad drying spinner thing once. And then what you're going to rip it up and put it in Tupperware. And for 3 or 4 days, you'll have, all you have to do is put your hand in that Tupperware, grab a handful of pre-washed lettuce. There you go. It's in a bowl and you've got the base for a salad, right? And you can do the same, cut up a few peppers, cut up a couple of cucumbers. Like, these things won't last forever, but they'll certainly last for a 3-day period in the fridge. And it does, I know for myself, when I come home from work and I'm tired, there's no way I'm making a salad from scratch. So that's what I would do on a Sunday. I would wash the whole head of lettuce. And then I know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I've got my salad started already for me. And although this isn't food, I do want to say, especially if people are finding themselves gaining weight, for both weight gain and fatigue, physical activity has been known to be helpful. So I highly recommend doing whatever you are able to do within your ability, which of course everybody's ability is going to be different. I love this picture because it reminds me of the bathing caps that all the women wore when I was a little kid in the swimming pools. Remember those flowery bathing caps? My mom had those. But anything, I don't think that you have to, again, start to try and be Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything, but something is better than nothing. I think a lot of people are daunted at, especially if you're like me and you're on the couch potato side, it's daunting to start anything. But even if you just take a walk, right? Do what you can. All you need is comfortable shoes. You don't need a gym membership. Just get out and take a little bit of a walk. And those kind of things can really help with everything, with weight control, with mood, with physical health, obviously. It's good for everything. And it's also good for sleep. I didn't mention sleep, but people often have trouble sleeping, especially if they're worried or anxious. There's nothing that helps you sleep better than being legitimately physically tired. So that's another reason to take a little walk. Keep your muscles knowing that what they're for. Okay. And now I put this slide up. I realize people might want to look at different resources. AICR is that American Institute of Cancer Research. BC is British Columbia Cancer Agency. Cancer.ca is a Canadian organization. Cancer.org is American. Princess Margaret, that's the facility that I work at. There's some resources there. Wellspring is a nonprofit for all cancer diagnoses, but they have some good virtual classes that you might be interested in. Mayo Clinic is American. Nourish Online has produced a series of booklets that you might be interested in. Some are general, some are cancer specific. So obviously in this group, you're not going to be reading the one on prostate cancer, but there are some nutrition resources there. Elixir is based at Toronto General. It's through Princess Margaret. Funny way of spelling elixir. It's an acronym for some experiential living laboratory. They made it as difficult as possible, but it's very good. And MSKCC is Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and they have a great they have a section on herbal medication. So I know a lot of people Google for their information, but Google gives you a very unfiltered amount of information. So when you Google, you can get something put up by a company trying to sell you something. You can get information from a well-meaning person who just happens to have an opinion, and you can also get legitimate research. So if you go to Memorial Sloan Kettering, if you want to look up a herb and what it does and whether or not it's safe, that is a cancer center. So it's a more reputable source of information. And then, does anyone have questions? Oh,
that was, and if there's any more questions, please throw them on the chat box or join right in. Something just came in from Caitlin.
yeah.
Are smoothies okay to get extra veggies? Great question.
I do think that they're okay. Now you can get a lot you keep the fiber with a smoothie. It's not like a juice, right? I know a lot of people have juicers and unfortunately they eliminate the fiber, but with a smoothie it's different. It's like you're blending it, so any fiber that's in those vegetables is going to stay in the drink. So I'd say the whole fruits and vegetables are the best way to go, so that you're actually chewing and swallowing something. But then a smoothie is second best, and then the juice would be the worst because you've gotten rid of the fiber.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? I'm curious why what you're saying about that chewing a food is better than, say, a smoothie.
Yeah. Your body gets ready to digest food starting from when you put it in your mouth. And in your saliva, you've got some enzymes that help break down some carbohydrate. You've got, obviously, once it hits your stomach, you've got all kinds of digestive juices going on in there. But it does, the act of chewing and swallowing is part of what triggers your body to know food is coming. And also, the act of chewing and swallowing slows you down. If anyone is gaining weight, getting a lot of calories. Now, when you say a smoothie, if it's just made of vegetables, it's not going to be super high calorie. So that might not be an issue for this exact question. But I know a lot of people make smoothies that have not just fruit, which is going to have some calories in it, of course, but they put a lot of other things in it as well, right? So it can be a concoction, and then you're maybe having 300 or 400 calories, but it's gulp, 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 and it's done. And because it's in liquid form, it empties from your stomach faster and you get hungrier faster. So the act of chewing and swallowing slows you down on the way in. And also because you don't chew everything down to completely pureed, then it takes longer to digest and empty from your stomach. So you get more food satisfaction from solid food.
So if there's any more questions, I would invite you. I'm mindful of the time. Susan, talk about A1 on time. Poor Susan, I've been messaging her time check just so she knows where she's at, and 8:02, bang. And we started late because I had technical difficulties. So well done. Thank you. So what I would just like to do is wrap up this. This was such a fabulous, fabulous webinar. I know that I learned a lot. And I know that I get so many questions from my patients, and I'm not a dietitian nutrition expert. So this is so fabulous. And I have zero doubts that this is going to be a lovely, wonderful resource for men and women currently going through treatment and men and women who are going to be joining BCA down the road. So thank you so, so much. This was just such a fabulous, fabulous talk. And we are so grateful. We are so grateful to have had you and come and join us this evening. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, and I'm glad you're feeling better too.
Yes, me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And I wanted also just to thank everybody as well for joining us this evening. And also thank you for your understanding. I know we did have to delay this talk by a week, but we appreciate everybody's understanding about that. So I'm just going to stop recording and wrap up here. I don't even know how to, there we go.